In the dead of winter, with snow piling up like forgotten regrets, outside a modest bungalow in rural Ontario, Sarah clutched her phone. Her hands trembling not just from the cold, but from the fear that her world was about to come crashing down. Water gushed from the cracked tank in her basement, flooding the floor and threatening to ruin everything she had left after her husband's sudden death 2 years ago. It was 2 a.m., and she was alone with her young son, who slept unaware upstairs, his innocent breaths a stark contrast to her rising panic. Desperate, she dialed the only 24-hour handyman service she could find, whispering a prayer that anyone would answer. On the other end of the line, in a cluttered apartment in nearby Toronto, Mike stared at his ringing phone, his heart heavy with the weight of another sleepless night. At 52, he was a widower himself, his days filled with fixing other people's problems while his own life felt irreparably broken. His wife had passed from cancer 5 years earlier, leaving him with a void that no toolbox could fill. He had taken up handyman work after retiring from his factory job, hoping the physical labor would drown out the loneliness. But tonight, he almost let the call go to voicemail. Something in the urgency of the ring made him pick up. Though Mike's repairs, he grumbled, his voice rough from too many cigarettes and too little hope. Sarah's voice cracked as she explained the situation: a burst water tank in her old house. Water everywhere, and no one to help. She was a single mom, working 2 jobs as a nurse to keep the roof over their heads. But this was beyond her. Mike could hear the exhaustion in her words, the kind that mirrored his own. He sighed, glancing at the clock, but then thought of his late wife, how she always said helping others was the best way to heal yourself. "I'll be there in an hour," he said, grabbing his coat and tools, braving the icy roads that stretched like frozen veins through the Canadian countryside. When Mike arrived, the house was a mess of soggy boxes and pooling water. But what struck him most was Sarah's face, pale, lined with worry, yet determined. Her son, little Tommy, just 7 years old, peeked from the stairs, his eyes wide with curiosity and fear. Mike rolled up his sleeves and got to work, draining the water, assessing the damage. As he labored, Sarah brought him coffee, and they started talking. She shared how her husband, a truck driver, had died in a highway accident on the 401, leaving her to raise Tommy alone. The water tank breaking felt like the final straw, a symbol of how everything in her life seemed to leak away. Mike nodded, his wrench pausing for a moment. He opened up too, something he hadn't done in years, about losing his Emily. How he buried himself in work to avoid the empty house, the silence that screamed louder than any noise. "Fixing things is easy," he admitted, his voice softening. "It's the heart that's hard to mend." As the night wore on, the repair turned into something more. The tank was old, rusted through from years of neglect, much like their own lives. Mike didn't just patch it. He replaced parts he had in his truck, going beyond the call to ensure it wouldn't fail again soon. But the real fix happened in the conversations, the shared laughs over Tommy's drawings of superheroes who fixed everything, the tears when Sarah confessed her fear of failing her son, and Mike's quiet admission that he felt purposeless without someone to care for. By dawn, the basement was dry, the new tank humming steadily. Sarah insisted on paying, but Mike waved it off, saying the company was payment enough. Tommy hugged him goodbye, calling him Uncle Mike, and something in that innocent gesture cracked the ice around Mike's heart. As he drove home, the sun rising over snow-covered fields, he felt a warmth he hadn't known in years, not from the heater, but from within. Sarah, watching him leave, felt a spark of hope. For the first time since her loss, she didn't feel utterly alone. In the weeks that followed, Mike started checking in, offering to fix other small things around the house: leaky faucet, a creaky door. Sarah baked him cookies, invited him for dinner. Tommy adored him, and soon, Mike was teaching the boy how to use tools, sharing stories of his own childhood in the American Midwest before he moved north for work. What began as a simple repair call blossomed into a makeshift family. Sarah found strength in Mike's quiet support, pushing her to pursue a better nursing position she had been too scared to apply for. Mike, in turn, rediscovered joy through their laughter, even volunteering at a local shelter, realizing that helping one person could ripple into helping many. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Tommy play in the melting spring snow, Sarah turned to Mike. "That broken tank," she said, her eyes misty. "It wasn't just water spilling out. It was fate, bringing you here." Mike smiled, his hand brushing hers. "Yeah, and it fixed more than I ever thought possible." Their lives, once adrift in grief, were now anchored in connection. It wasn't a fairy tale romance, but a real, human bond, born from vulnerability and kindness. Years later, Tommy would remember that night, not for the flood, but for the man who showed up in the storm. And in a world that often feels cold and isolating, their story whispers a powerful truth. Sometimes, the smallest calls for help can lead to the greatest transformations. Reach out, lend a hand. You never know whose life you'll change, including your own.